This morning we're continuing our This Christmas series, and today we come to This Christmas Share. If you know much at all about the Christmas story, it's a story about giving, God giving His Son as a gift to the human race, people traveling from thousands of miles away to give gifts to this newborn King. In the Christmas story, though, are two anti-giving people. We could call them the Grinch and Scrooge of first century Middle East. Their names are Caesar Augustus and Herod. Maybe you don't know much about those two, but Caesar Augustus was the second Caesar. The first Caesar was Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was his father. Julius Caesar made two significant contributions to society. One is a salad, the Caesar salad. The second is a bowl haircut, a really bad bowl haircut. Those are his two primary contributions. But he's killed in BC 44, he's killed by the Roman Senate and Brute. And then his son, Octavius, who really was his adopted nephew, fights for power for about 15 years before Octavius finally takes power. When he does take power, the Roman Senate names him Augustus. Augustus means the illustrious one. So the illustrious one, Caesar, is now in control of Rome, and he wants power and he wants wealth. So he starts to conquer. He conquers everything to the west, all the way to Spain, all the way to England. He conquers all the way to India in the east, Germany to the north, North Africa to the south, and he has control of it all. The problem is when you have an empire that large, how do you afford an army to keep everything under your control? And those of you that have conquered the world with an army to establish an empire, you know how this works, all right? That's a lot of you here. Yeah, what you do is you start to tax the people. But if you say you're going to tax people in remote corners of the world like Bethlehem and Nazareth, how do you make sure they're collecting they're paying their taxes? You need a puppet king. And so Caesar Augustus puts Herod in power. Herod's only 27 years old, and he empowers him. He calls him Herod, King of the Jews, at 27. And he gives him a 600-man army to take over Jerusalem and then start to collect taxes. And that's what Herod is good at. Herod is 2 for Caesar, 1 for me, and he starts to build his own empire, and he starts to build palaces. He builds one mountain in the middle of the desert, literally builds the mountain, then puts a 7-story palace on top with a swimming pool big enough, they said, to sail a boat in. And then he builds the world's largest port. He had seen ships going down the Mediterranean past Israel from Egypt. It's like, we need a port, so he builds a port city, and he names it Caesarea. Some say it's the biggest brown-nosed move in all of world history because he names it after Caesar. Caesar, I'm doing something good for you down here. So you have Caesar Augustus and you have Herod. They're building an empire built on greed and power. And then Jesus is born, and God comes along, and he sends his son to establish a new kind of empire, a counter greed and power empire based on generosity and love. So that's where we're going to pick up our Christmas story. So open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 2, and I'm going to start reading in verse 1. And we'll read about these characters we just talked about. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" Then we read this, we saw his star and it rose, and we have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. Why is King Herod disturbed? Because the illustrious one had said, "Herod, you're king of the Jews." And now they're saying, "Where's the new king of the Jews?" Verse 7. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." Herod was also a liar. All right, verse 11. We'll come to the end of it. So the Magi go to Bethlehem. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother. They bowed down and worshiped, and they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I said that Christmas is about giving, and we read not just has God given his son to save us, we read, from our sins and give us eternal life. But then we see people giving in worship to God. A Christmas is a giving story. I want to make several observations from this text that we just read about giving, about sharing, about generosity. And the first one is this, is that giving is what love does. If you love someone, then you give, don't you? When you fall in love, one of the first things you do is give. Maybe one of the most neglected Bible or Christmas stories in the Bible is in John chapter 3. We read this, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life." Do you see what we read here is that because of God's great love, he gave. Giving is what love does. Giving is an expression of love. But here's the catch. You can't just give anything if you love someone or love something. You have to give something of value. You can't get really cheap. For example, can I just talk to the men here who are married? This is just a life coach moment here. So this Christmas, maybe you want to buy your wife jewelry, and that's an honorable thing. Now, some men, though, and I want to share this because some men want to get creative when they go shopping. They think, you know what, I need to buy some jewelry, but I also need to get my tires rotated. And I know a store where I can get my oil changed and my tires rotated and shop for jewelry. That's the wrong store. If the name of the store ends in Club or Co. or anything like that, you're in the wrong big box. If you can get a flat screen and new tires and jewelry, you're just in the wrong place. If you're shopping for jewelry, if you want something valuable to express your love, you have to go to a store that just sells jewelry, that has a guard at the door, and someone needs to get a key to unlock where the jewelry is. All right? You need to find, if there's no one there with a key, if the jewelry is out on a counter next to the register, next to the Trident and the National Enquirer, it's the wrong store. You're in the wrong place. It's not going to cost that much. Giving is what love does, but when love is really there, it has to be something valuable. We read in Matthew chapter 11 that the Magi, we read of their gift. We read, on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures, I love that line, and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Giving is what love does. That's the first observation. Here's another observation. Giving to God, as we see in this passage, is an act of worship. In two separate lines here, we read this, going all the way back to verse 2. The wise men or the Magi are asking, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him. And then when we go back to verse 11, we read they bowed down and worshiped him. And then they gave gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Giving to God is an act of worship. We say that at the Grove often. We say, as part of your worship, give. But I don't think we think much about that. I have a couple of thoughts here. Here's what happens when you give. When you give, it reminds us that God comes first. I think giving is an expression of our dependence on God. Giving is a statement of your gratitude. Giving reminds us to hold on loosely. That's what happens when you give. I sometimes hear people say things like this. These are people that I've known, and they'll say to me at the Grove, they think I know what people give here. I don't know what you give at the Grove, but I've had people come to me and say, hey, Palmer, as soon as I get out of credit card debt, as soon as I get out of debt, I'm going to give. In fact, I'm going to give a lot. And I want to say, I don't know what you give, but I almost want to say back to them, well, how's that working out for you so far? Because we read in Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, God says, bring your tithe to my house when you come to worship. And when you do, see if I don't open up the floodgates of heaven. I said that giving is an expression of love. And if you're going to give as an expression of love, it has to be something valuable or it's not worth a whole lot, right? And as I say that, I think about a short story written by a writer. He wrote it in 1905. His name is O. Henry, and he writes a story called The Gift of the Magi. Anyone here read this in school? A few educated people, thank you very much. And The Gift of the Magi is about a young couple, Jim and Della. And Jim and Della are in love, and it's Christmas Eve, but Della doesn't have a gift for Jim. And she's only 19. I think he's like 22 in the story. And the narrator says that they only have two things of value in the house. One is her long hair that comes down past her waist, is beautiful hair. And then he has this gold pocket watch that his grandfather gave him. And she wants to buy a gold chain so he can clip it on his belt and wear the watch every day to work because he's leaving it at home. But she doesn't have enough money. The storyteller says she has $1.87. That won't even get you a gallon of gas, not even in 1905, I don't think. And so she thinks, here's what I'll do. I'll sell my hair. So she goes to a wig maker in their town, and they chop off her hair, and she sells it, but she has enough to buy the gold chain for his watch, for his pocket watch. And she's so proud of herself. She goes home, and then she sees her hair, and she says, oh my, what have I done? And she curls her hair and tries to make it look good, and then she's waiting anxiously by the door, and he comes in. And he looks and he goes, what'd you do to your hair? And you cut off your hair. And he turns as white as a ghost. What happened? And she said, well, I had to cut off my hair because I wanted to buy you a gift. And then she gives him the gold chain. And she said, I bought this for you. And he says, well, you don't understand. I brought you a gift too. And he sits down at the table and just hangs his head. Then he opens the gift. And they're gold combs for her hair. But the hair is gone. And she says, those are beautiful. She said, how do you know? I've been looking at those for months in the store, for months and months. I never thought we could afford them. Then she says, but how did you pay for them? He said, I sold the pocket watch. Thank you very much. And some of you got it. And so they both end up giving up, sacrificing the most valuable thing that they have. I think it's like that in our worship. If you're going to worship as an act of worship, it has to be something valuable that you give. I love when we read this story, these magi are bringing the most valuable gift possible. And so the question for us is, what will we give of value to God when we worship? Sometimes in some churches, I think Christians come to church and we just tip God. We give God our leftover cash, what's left over at the end of the month. We don't give really as an act of worship. We don't share much of value. But God wants to change that. That's the second observation, is giving to God as an act of worship. Here's a third observation from this story, is that it is the challenge to give more presents this Christmas. Now, we've spelled it with a C-E instead of a T-S. Give more presents this Christmas. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 2, verse 11. We read, on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, and they bowed down and worshiped him. So the Magi have traveled, some say over 1,000 miles, and then they walk into the house to physically be there. They could have, we read that they were, we think, affluent. Some say they were kings. They could have just sent the gifts with someone else. They could have sent it Amazon Prime. They could have done that, something like that. But they've come and they walk into the house and they're present. Some say that your presence is the most powerful force in the universe. There's a small town called Gold Beach, Oregon, on the Oregon coast, and they have a volunteer fire department. And a while ago, they were holding a fundraiser breakfast, pancake breakfast, so they put flyers up around Gold Beach, Oregon. And the flyer simply read, you come to our pancake breakfast, and we'll come to your fire. That's what they said. You know, you come hang out with us when we need you, and when you need help, we'll come hang out with you. I think the most valuable thing that you can give to God this Christmas is your presence. And maybe the most valuable thing you can give to the people around you who you love the most is your presence. It's surprising how even fast food restaurants are beginning to realize this. I was at Chick-fil-A this week with two of my sons, and someone, while we're eating lunch, had noticed that we had several phones sitting on the table, and someone said, well, why don't we grab the box of silence and put our phones in it? I said, the box of silence, what's that? They said, well, it's like the cone of silence. And if we put our phones in it, and then we close the box, and no one texts, no one answers a phone call while we eat, then after we're done eating, we can take the box up to the counter, and they'll give everyone free ice cream. Who knew? I didn't know this. But do you know what a fast food restaurant knows? Is that the people who you care about, that you're eating with, lunch or breakfast or dinner or whatever, that your texts aren't so important, your Snapchat update isn't so important, your Facebook or whatever it is that you have on your phone, but it's your presence that people want. And sometimes we rob even the ones we love of it. Absence is probably the most opposite you can get of present. And when you're away from someone that you love, doesn't it start to pull on your heart? For example, there was a guy here at the Grove quite a while ago. His name was Mark, a friend of mine, and he's moved. But Mark and I were talking about traveling, and I don't know how we got on this subject, but he said, when I travel, and he traveled for business a lot, he said, I always take my favorite mug. I said, why would you take your mug? You know, every Hampton Inn or Marriott, wherever you say, they have mugs. He goes, you don't understand. My mug is different. He said, my mug has a picture of my daughter on it. And so when I go downstairs in the morning for breakfast, I take my mug and I put my mug on the table. And then as I'm getting ready for my morning, even when I'm traveling, I can see my daughter's face. One day apart is too long. Let's say you have a son who lives far away in another state. And it's Christmas. He's just graduated from high school, and he can't make it back for Christmas, so he sends you the most valuable gift that he can find. He's saved up for months, and he sends you, his mother, a Kate Spade purse. What? That's incredible. And then as your father, he sends you a set of Ping G3 irons. And you're like, this is the best Christmas. What a son, what a great son, and it's a great Christmas. Those are great gifts. But what if instead of that, on Christmas morning, you get a knock on the door, and when you answer it, here's your son, and he says, hey, I've been driving all night to make it here, and I don't even have any presents for anyone. I just want you to know that. I spent all my money on gas trying to make it across the country, but I'm here for Christmas. Let me ask you, how much better is that to have him present than even a gift? So that's why I say, give more presents this Christmas. Give your presents to God. Give your presents to the ones around you who you love. The Hebrew people, when Jesus arrived on the scene, God seemed very distant and far away. But the Hebrew writers, like Isaiah, used to write of a day when God would come close. And Isaiah writes this, chapter 9, verse 2, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. For unto us a child is born, a son is given, and God has come very close to us. God is present with us, and this Christmas he's asking if we'll be present with him. Okay, final observation. Share your blessings this Christmas. We'll go right back to our share story, chapter 2, verse 1. We read this. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. And I just want to stop there. Some say they traveled over 1,000 miles to get there. Some say they traveled a month, 2 months, 3 months. Why did they make that long journey? In order to simply share a blessing. Sometimes we have to go far places to share a blessing. My point here is that God has blessed you. I think in different ways God has blessed all of us. And one of the primary reasons that God has blessed your life is so that you can be a blessing to somebody else. It's kind of like this. Paul Gunther, who was up here a few minutes ago, is one of our pastors here on staff. And what a lot of you may not know about Paul is that before Paul became a pastor, he was a record label band promoter, and he would promote bands for record labels. And one of the bands that he was promoting was Sixpence None the Richer. Maybe you've heard their song, Kiss Me. In fact, it went platinum, I think, and he has his platinum album hanging in his office still. Anyway, so as he's trying to promote Sixpence None the Richer, he got them scheduled on the David Letterman show in New York City. And so the first thing they did was call Hershey's and ask them to send the Kissmobile over, which has a huge Hershey's Kiss on it. And then they went to the line of people waiting to get in, and they bribed them with Hershey's Kisses and said, when sixpence none the richer plays Kiss Me on the Letterman show, when you're in there, then start cheering and don't stop. Start clapping, don't sit down, and don't stop clapping. Because they will normally go to a commercial break, but if David Letterman really likes the band, he'll call them to sit on the couch, and you want your band on the couch. That's when you really sell CDs. And so Sixpence played Kiss Me, and when they were done, the crowd stood and just kept clapping and clapping. And finally, Letterman said, all right, we're not going to commercial break, and he brings the band over to the couch, and they sit down. And he hasn't prepared for this because they were supposed to go to a commercial break. So he just says, so you have a strange name, Sixpence None the Richer. What does that mean? And so Lee Nash, the lead singer, starts to explain. She says, C.S. Lewis, who's a theologian and a writer, in his book, Mere Christianity, he talks about a boy. He writes about a boy who's maybe like 8 years old in England, and it's Christmas time, and he needs a gift for his father. So he goes to his dad, because at 8 years old, he has no money. He goes to his dad, and he says, can I have a sixpence? It's just a small amount of currency. And the father gives him the sixpence, and then he goes shopping, and he wraps his gift, and he puts it under the tree, and then on Christmas morning, the father opens the gift. But C.S. Lewis says, but the father is not any richer, because the sixpence was his to begin with. And so Letterman says this, Letterman says, so he bought his own gift, and Nash went on, and she says, that's right. C.S. Lewis was comparing that to the idea that God has given us everything we possess, and to serve him the way we should live, sharing generously, realizing God gave us the gifts in the first place. And then Letterman stammers, well, that's beautiful. So the question is, will you convert your blessing into a blessing for someone else? And maybe you're sitting here this morning and you're thinking to yourself, well, Palmer, you can't be talking to me because I'm not rich. And I know you're not rich. None of us feel rich in Chandler, Gilbert, Tempe, Queen Creek, wherever you live near here. We don't feel rich, but I think you're blessed. Some of you are saying, well, look, I don't even have a 3-car garage. I have a 2-car garage, and I can't even park both cars in it. You know, I got so much stuff in there. Some of you guys are saying to yourselves, well, I'm not rich, you know. All I have at home is a 55-inch, you know, 1080K HD. You know, I don't even have the new 4K 70-inch Ultra HD. I don't have that. Some of you are thinking, I'm not rich. I haven't even gotten the iPhone 7 yet. I'm still using the iPhone 6 Plus S, and it's so inadequate. It's unbelievable. That's how we live. You're blessed. You just don't think about it. So what will you do with your blessing? You know, what will you do with it? My challenge this morning is to convert it into a blessing for somebody else. I think the challenge for us is to hold on loosely. I'll use this language. I would challenge you to develop a flow-through philosophy in your life. Because a lot of times, rather than letting the blessings of God go through our lives into somebody else, we just hold on to them. We shortstop them. A few years ago, and I'll say this, a flow-through philosophy is a very difficult thing to live out. I know this because a few years ago, it was right around Christmas time, just after Christmas. I'd finished a Sunday morning service, and a friend of mine who is in the NFL comes up to me after the service, and he says, Palmer, our team gave everyone 2 tickets to the Super Bowl in Dallas. And then he says, would you, and I'm certain that his next words are going to be, would you, he says, my wife and I can't go, but would you, and I'm sure he's going to say, would you and Veronica like to go? But he doesn't say that. He says, would you share these with someone on your staff who would enjoy going? I was like, oh no, well, let me think about this. Am I on the staff? I'm on the staff. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm on the staff. That should count for something. But I was sure he just needed to phrase it differently. So I said, hey, could you repeat the question? And that's like, hey, can we just start over again? And he says, Palmer, could you share this with someone on your staff? So I was like, all right, give me the ticket. I'm so excited about it. Yeah, can I? And he gives me the ticket, and it's in Dallas. I've been a Dallas fan my whole life, and they have a brand new stadium. Green Bay versus Pittsburgh. I know it's going to be an epic Super Bowl. I said, yeah, I'm so excited about sharing these with somebody. And then I got to give them to someone on our staff and watch them celebrate and get all excited. And then I got to follow them on Facebook as they go down to Dallas, and it snows. It doesn't snow in Arizona, but it was snowing in Dallas. And then the game by halftime, it's already a great game. Black Eyed Peas play. Some say it was the best halftime show ever. But I'm just thinking, I'm watching them on Facebook, all their play. I'm thinking, God bless them. I'm so glad, so happy for them. Just thank you for blessing them. Letting go is really hard, isn't it? I'm not going to lie to you. Letting God's blessings flow through you and into someone else. But it changes everything. You know, positionally, relationally, there's really two ways to live. We can live with our hands open. Do that with me. Whatever, just put your hands out, open them up. There's a lot of things, and turn to the person next to you. You can give them something relationally. You can high-five them. You can hit them on the back. You can rub their belly. I don't know. Don't do that. That's kind of weird. If you don't know them, that's really weird. But we can go through life with our hands open, letting go, or we can hold on tightly. Would all of you clench your fist? You feel angry right now, don't you? You feel angry when you do that. And then now turn to the person next to you. Relationally, what can you do? There's only one. You can just hit them. That's the only, don't do it, but that's the only thing. It's about the only thing you can do. And I just hope you see that in the smallest ways, that when God blesses you, see that what he's given you is to be a blessing for somebody else. It's the best way to live. Jesus kept saying that. In Acts chapter 20, he says, it's more blessed to give than to receive. We think, because our culture tells us this, that getting and stockpiling and holding on is the best way. It's not. Jesus says the most fortunate ones are the ones who give. The ones who are blessed are the ones who share. That's the best position in life. And so I want to invite you to live that way this morning. Share your blessing.